thank you very much for being at tonight's meeting. We're going to start the meeting with to approve some routine items. Need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 10th, 2023, accept and order filed the minutes of the Committee on Special Education for the dates listed, accept and order filed the minutes of the Committee of Preschool Special Education for the dates listed. Do I have a motion?
Second.
So moved by Amanda, seconded by Heidi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, do we have anybody for public comments? Mrs. Strun?
Stella?
Stella? Do we have anything for Stella? Okay, that's going to move us into the committees, personnel.
This one's pretty routine for this time of the year. We have 3 retirements, though. Karen Countryman, 11 years, Dawn Collins, 16 years, and Shelley Hayes, 18 years. Thank them for the time dedication to the district.
Oh. Still got a red light.
The red light is on.
Oh, red light's good. I thought the red light was off, sorry. That's it, if anybody has any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Knee? Okay, so by consent, that carries. That moves us to athletics, Mr. Fitzgerald.
All right. Held our meeting last week. Winter sports registration has begun. Some of the varsity and junior varsity teams have started their practices up. Modified will be coming in the coming weeks. We had our cheerleading squad participating in the state tournament. Congratulations to them on having a great season this year. Great support from our community. Going off of my memory here, so I'm missing a few things. I'm sure, Mr. Ward, you can help me out.
I can help. And we'll go back and forth if that's okay.
Yeah,
Does that work? Mr. Carpenter shared that the modified football merger and the football merger in general with Fort Edward has been great. We saw the most success at the modified with having more players coming to our teams from Fort Edward. Girls tennis were sectional finalists, and back when we were meeting, football still had the crossover game remaining. That's obviously been played since then. Still looking for a girls lacrosse coach as of last week. There was a few things. We had some concerns previously about family ID, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. We have had no more concerns expressed about that, and to our knowledge, all students are participating in athletics, even from members who may have been concerned previously. So happy to report that. Mr. Carpenter has been working with getting a captain's club up and running and also reinvigorating a varsity club. So a lot more student voice in athletics. He's working through that, and part of that is to make sure that he's got a nice group of officers for his athletics ECA account, and the other part is to have students in leadership roles. That's been one of his goals since he started here 3 years ago. We talked a little about AED, CPR, and first aid training and how that happens for our coaches. We talked about some different sports that have paid assistants and others that don't have paid assistant coaches. Some things to be talking about as we move through the budget season and possibly negotiations with the Teachers Association. And I have down, we talked about branding as well, talking about uniforms and consistency with logos. So that's, I don't know if that triggered your memory with anything else, but that was my laundry list
Yeah,
Oh,
we
from
did
that
have
day.
a couple students, 2 students from each grade level attend the leadership conference, which the feedback on that, it was terrific. Kids were able to participate, learn more about how to be better leaders, how to help their teammates out in hard times, stuff like that.
Yeah, and that, you're right, that was the, for our Foothills League
Yep.
Leadership Conference. Lots of good things, good information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mr. Fitzgerald? Okay, that moves us to audit. Since Mrs. Grimaldi's not here tonight, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Palunzi.
Yep.
Thank you. We're actually going to start off with the audit committee tonight I'd like to introduce the gentleman in the front row. It's Mr. Christopher Healy with MMB. He did our audit. We switched audit firms this year after many years. It's been longer since I've been here. And MMB picked up a lot of the local schools. that Jenkins Beecher and Bethel used to have. And so we've been working back and forth. He's been working closely with Mary Kay, conducting the audit, and we got everything completed this afternoon. That's why you have a draft audit in front of you, and he's going to speak a little bit about it. And then at the end, we will have a resolution, and it'll be for the board accepting receipt of the audit. Okay, so I'm going to turn it right over to Chris.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to try to go through this as concisely as I can. There's a lot of information here. Before I even start, I do want to, thank Kevin and Mary Kay for their help in going through. Certainly the first time as a new district with a new auditor, there's certainly things that we look at in a different way. So just a quick little background. Our office of MMB was formerly Marvin and Company, so we've been in the area for 100 years performing these services. We work with about 100 public school districts across the state, combined out of all of our offices. So certainly, a wealth of background here. I've been with the firm for about 11 years, focusing in this area. So what I'm going to go through quickly with you here first is a separate communication that's just the communication with those charged with governance. It lets you know that you engaged us to audit the financial statements. We performed that audit in accordance with professional standards. Professional standards require us to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. So we're not looking at everything that happens during the year. We're not looking at every transaction, but we assess risk and we perform procedures to address those risks. We did perform the audit in consistent with the planned timing and scope that we communicated in the engagement letter. We upheld our ethical responsibilities and were independent of the district. Significant risks identified during the audit. So every audit that is performed, it's presumptively mandatory that revenue recognition and management override of internal controls be considered significant risks. And that's really because you could have a great system of internal controls, but if there's some way for management to circumvent that, that's obviously a significant risk to your organization. And then revenue recognition, for obvious reasons, you obviously want to report a sound financial position, so there's a risk there that you might potentially overstate revenue. So those are not things that the district does or does not do. That's not reflective of that. That's reflective of just the environment in which you operate. So that's just an important distinguishment there. All financial statements have estimates. We consider those estimates as part of our audit process. And then there are no uncorrected misstatements. We did have a number of corrected misstatements, and so those are summarized both in the main report, which we'll look at briefly here in a moment, as well as in that separate communication, just summarizing those adjustments. A vast majority related to your capital project, so just timing of closing out the year based on when you got the invoices and things like that, so just closing that out. Otherwise, everything in that communication is pretty standard. So if we move to the actual financial statement packet, I'm going to look right on page 1. And I should just note that there was one adjustment that, based on timing, we didn't have a chance to reflect in here. And I'll point that out as we go through quickly just for you so that you're aware of what that one adjustment that'll be made in that final report for you. So right on page 1, in our opinion, we believe the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the district. So that's the clean, unmodified opinion that you're looking for that says that we believe everything that's in here is fairly stated in all material respects. Again, we're not looking at everything, reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. There are several items that we adjusted based on the prior year ending balances, and I'll talk a little bit about those as we go through here. Again, I'm not going to go through every page, but I'll point out some of those areas. But there were some adjustments required based on where those ending balances were last year to just make sure that you're following the guidelines. Management's responsible for the financial statements. We're responsible to audit the financial statements, and we've really talked about most of the rest of the information in there. So I'm going to skip ahead real quickly here to page 11. So the one adjustment that still needs to be reflected in here is in the due in more than 1 year. about 3/4 of the way down the page. That number will come down by about $4 million. And that's related to your compensated absence calculation. So there's various standards that cover this, but the way that the district has pays out retiree the accumulated sick and vacation time, you don't really pay that out. You convert that to sick. You convert that time into being used towards the retiree health insurance, and that adds a little complexity to how you record that liability. In the past, that liability has just been recorded as the rate, the individual's rates times their unused balances. But that doesn't really reflect what you're eventually going to pay, because you're going to pay some amount of premiums towards their health insurance. So one of the suggestions that we have is that you work with your actuary to see if that can be built into the calculation of your retiree health insurance and the GASB 75 liability, and not have a separate liability, because that really gets into actuarial calculation when you're trying to determine what the future rates will be. Will they retire? Will they not retire? So on and so forth. But we were able to come up with a calculation that at least gets a little bit closer to that point for this year. So it's a big number, but it's not that has no impact on your general fund or your budgeting. You pay those things as they go. It's more of a paper type thing. But again, coming in the first year, we really like to make sure we look at all those things and get those corrected in that first year. So that's the one adjustment that still needs to be reflected. If you flip to the next page, you'll see the prior period adjustment correction of an error. So that you'll see that $4 million be added to that line, because really that should come out of the opening balances. It's not a current year item. And then there are a couple of other items in here. One was related to smart schools, and just there was no receivable booked for a piece of that. So that's a state-funded program where really you're reimbursed based on what you spend. So if you've spent monies on allowable costs, you should have a revenue to offset that. So there's an adjustment in there for that. And then there's an adjustment in there also for the long-term debt. So there was a difference in what was in your prior financial statements as total outstanding bonds payable at the end of last year of about $120,000. That's also flowing through there. So again, I'm not going to go through the rest of this. I just wanted to point out those pieces that were really prior corrections. I also just wanted to point out, if we go all the way to the back to page 65. So this is a nice summary of all the reports that we have. You expend more than $750,000 in federal awards, so you're also required to have a single audit. So as part of the audit process this year, we did look at your education stabilization funds, which encompasses all of those COVID dollars. And so that's listed here. We issued, or will be issuing, an unmodified opinion on compliance that says that we believe you complied with all the requirements. And then here's where I want to point out the couple of findings that we have. So your 4% real property tax limitation, as you all know, you're required to be 4% or less of the subsequent year's budget. You came in at about 5.5%, give or take, which was about $772,000 over that limitation. Because that's considered noncompliance with the law, I'm required to report that here as a noncompliance finding. But this is not an uncommon, an uncommon trend the last few years. Many of our districts have elected to leave those funds in the unassigned fund balance, where they have more access to those funds. When you put those into the reserve funds, it becomes very specific what those uses can be. So it's noncompliance because the law says you're not supposed to be over that. No other municipality in New York State has that limitation. So I think that's also important to realize, that you're limited in a way that nobody else is. So it's not necessarily a poor reflection of anything. It's just that's what the law says. So that's included here. The second item is related to the adjustments that we made as part of the audit process. So based on the dollar amounts of the adjustments that we encountered through audit procedures, I'm required to report a finding here, and we'll certainly sit down and work with the team moving forward for the next year to make sure that they're looking at those things ahead of time so we don't have those adjustments in the future. And then the last item relates to that single audit with the education stabilization funds. You use some of the funding to purchase a playground, and there are some specific inventory and tracking requirements related to purchasing equipment with federal dollars. That playground wasn't reflected in the property records that you had done by the outside party, so I'm required to report that in here as well. No issues with what you spend it on. It's allowable. It was approved. All those pieces were there, but just that tracking piece, and really what the federal government was trying to make sure is that if you were ever to surplus that item, you're supposed to send or ask if that federal agency wants the money back. Unlikely to ever happen with something like a playground, but there's nothing built into the regulation that allows for that kind of flexibility in making that judgment. So I don't think that's a significant thing, but I am required to report that based on the nature of that. So otherwise, we did also send to management a list of a couple of other items for their consideration. Those are not significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. They're just items for further consideration to help improve processes, help improve some of those things. So they have that information. And otherwise, I think, for the first year, I think things did go pretty smoothly. I know there was a lot of information. So again, I thank you to your team for working with us through all those pieces. The last piece will be the extra classroom activity fund audit. That's not due until January 15th. So in the interest of trying to expedite getting the main district audit done, we kind of put that on hold a little bit. So we'll be getting back into that next week to try to wrap that piece up as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. I tried to give you the pieces that I think are the most important, but certainly if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I just have one question regarding the compliance with the real property, the $772,000. Is there anything punitive on that at all, Kevin? Or no?
No.
No, you're talking about being over the 4%
Yeah.
loan balance? No, we have to, that's why we write that corrective action plan on
Okay.
ways that we're gonna use that money to get down to that 4%.
Okay.
And that'll actually entice me into something for audit. That's what we'll be doing at the next audit committee. So that'll be coming before the board too, so, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no, the only thing that you're potentially would see there is if OSC were to come in, they probably would write that in their report that you're over, but outside of that, there's no penalty or anything of that nature.
What is OSC?
Office of the State Comptroller.
Oh, okay.
Kevin, can you speak to how we do our fixed assets and when that playground will come onto our fixed assets list? Sorry.
Yep. So when it came to the federal money, when he was talking about the playground, we will do the fixed asset report within the next few months. We bring them in to update our fixed asset. And actually, we're changing the process in which we do that to, we're going to be looking through, it's Questar 3, right, Mary Kay? We're going to be looking to bring in Questar 3. They seem to be cutting edge with that, basically. So it's almost a timing issue, but when we do one report and then the playground was put in and then the other report, so that'll be in one of our, that'll be our corrective action plan on that we're going to bring that company in, and that way they can kind of update things as we move forward in real time too, versus the other companies that we use, so.
Other questions on the audit?
Thank you for a very thorough report.
You're probably going to say it, but I'll say it now. I want to thank Kevin and Mary Kay. It's not, excuse me, an easy task when you switch audit firms. I went through a similar changeover to Marvin and Company in my previous district, and there's a lot of heavy lifting that first year for sure. A lot of frustrating days sometimes, taking care of business. So thank you both for working through that, and thank you for the service as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, just, again, thank you. I know it definitely, we asked for a lot, so I wanted to just echo that one more time, that I do appreciate it. To work with you both.
And I just want to add, it's a difficult task for a new auditor to come in and figure out what previous people did. It's like going in and trying to figure out what somebody else did. It's difficult, and that's one of the reasons why it took us a little bit extra time to get this done, but we had to have the right baselines. We had to have right like that. So I'm just going to reiterate what Dan said. Mary Kay did a great job. Things were, Chris would send something and they were to him within minutes. So that was coming from her. It would take a little longer. So, but, so for the changeover, it was just, I would say it's as smooth as it could have been, so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Dan.
Chris.
We're gonna let Kevin keep going with the audit
Yep.
committee.
All yours, Kevin, for the rest of it.
It's all mine?
Yeah.
Okay. The audit committee met a couple weeks ago, I think it was, and we discussed the treasurer's reports, which everybody has in their packets. As of, it was for the month ended September 30, we had general fund cash balance of 8.3 million and total cash at 13.4 million. That puts us in a good spot moving forward. The next few months, we still are collecting taxes in October, but a majority of the taxes came in September. So you will see this go up a little bit, but we also are paying a lot of the bills from all the supplies and stuff that we bought over the summer. So we're in a good spot moving forward, because once you get into November, December, state aid gets a little thin until we get it past the first of the year. So right now, cash-wise, we're in a good spot there. The ECA balances you have also in your packets with all the background. Not a lot of activity, you know, it's the month of September, everybody's getting back, getting set up. You'll start to see a lot more things occur throughout the next few months. Just basically for revenues, you just basically had concessions, and you saw some purchases for uniform type things for some of the sports teams. So not a whole lot of activity there. Monthly bills are in there. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to email them me or contact me, and we can discuss them. We do have a resolution, and it is for a donation made by the Dollar General. You can see that on your screen here. It's for sleep pants, mac and cheese, ramen noodles, Pop-Tarts, canned vegetables, canned soup, canned broth, items like that, notebooks, pens, pencils. So in order for us to accept that, we need a resolution from the board. And then also, we have two resolutions, one's for natural gas and one for electricity. We join with about approximately 600 other school districts. It's called NISMIC. And it takes the buying power of all the school districts for gas and natural gas and electric, and we obviously get a tremendous price on it. And it's market price, but with that purchasing power, each year we do a resolution to join the cooperative purchasing on that. So this is something that we do annually, and I think that it just I recommend that we do that. Obviously, it's going to save us a lot in the long run, being part of it. We've been a part of it for the 15 years I've been here. So, and then the last resolution that we'll have is the one for the external audit. And basically, what we're doing here is the board is just approving the receipt of it, that you received a copy of it. Not that you agree with anything in it, just that you received a copy of it. So. Any questions?
Okay. So for the resolutions, be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Hudson Falls Central School District accepts the donations from Dollar General as Kevin listed. Do we have a motion? So moved by Mike, seconded by Amanda. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Hudson Falls Central School District approves the Cooperative Energy Purchasing Service Agreement for natural gas. Do we have a motion? To Mike, okay. Second by Mike. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Hudson Falls Central School District approves the Cooperative Energy, I just did that one, right? Okay. Did I skip the?
You skipped the
No.
treasurer's report, I think.
No, there's one for electricity.
Oh, that's the one I was on, okay. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of Hudson Falls Central School District approves the Cooperative Energy Purchasing Service Agreement for electricity. We have a motion. Moved by Vince, seconded by Heidi, all in favor? That carries. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Hudson Falls Central School District is in receipt of the 2022-2023 external audit by MMB Co. Do we have a motion? Moved by Vince, seconded by Amanda, all in favor? Opposed? And we just need a motion to approve September's treasurer's report. Mike, seconded by Megan, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. That is it for audits. That moves us to transportation. Dr. Steele?
Pretty straightforward committee report. Again, there's a DOT report there to read. There's a trip report is there to read. We do have two, as far as our workforce goes, we have two drivers that are currently out. We do have one that's training and ready to go into rotation for us. We have one bus that's inoperable, waiting on that to be fixed. And we have fuel prices there is listed for October. I don't have my notes, but the real notable thing for transportation is that we are starting a study to look at what we will need to be doing, facilities, et cetera, regarding the electric school buses, electric fleets, that we are approaching the deadline within a few years. So I don't have a lot of details on that. I don't remember what it's going to. Okay, so there we go.
I'll get it in BG.
We'll wait patiently for that. And that's it.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Steele? Okay. That moves us to buildings and grounds. Mrs. Borland.
Okay, so we actually had a busy month. We had 2 meetings this month. We met, well, actually the end of October and then the first week of November. Same as last month on the capital project. Everything looks like it's in good shape to be completed, as far as the timing of the closeout and all that. And so in discussion with ending that, we've got in 2024, there's the EPC work that was coming out of the original project. That's moved into 2024. So looking ahead into 2025 would be phase 2 of any future projects, and that's kind of what our meeting on the 7th focused on. We had March Associates and Schoolhouse both met with us that day, and we kind of got the ultimate wish list of everything that could be done, and from there, you know, as a community, you have to decide what's feasible and what direction is the best to take. So there, we'll be following up on that. I'll have more next month on that. Oh, and with that, the traffic study was completed, and that kind of looped into the recommendations from March. It had some interesting implications on things that could be done. And then, of course, the ED bus proposal. There's, I don't know, do you want to talk
can speak
about
to it.
the
Yep, for sure. So we received a proposal from SEI Design. It's an architectural firm that works with a group called Cornice Technology. Cornice Technology is partnered with a lot of architectural groups because they are the people who do the calculations on how much electricity you need on your plant to charge your buses, how far your buses will go. They work with the routing information that you have available. So we brought it to, excuse me, buildings and grounds, because probably the first thing that's going to happen is going to be the infrastructure as opposed to the actual buses on wheels. So I don't want you to think that we kept it out of transportation for any purpose. We held our kickoff meeting last week. Kevin and I were on there. Were you on? Mary Kay was on there. Aaron was on there, Aaron Cooper was on there from Transportation, Dave McKeegan was on there. Did I forget anybody else who was? So we held the kickoff meeting. They provided us some initial information for our consideration, and we provided them from the Transportation Department several pieces of information about our bus routes, so they can come back with information for us to help us plan to implement this properly as we're moving forward, because it's got to dovetail either with the next project, or it's going to have to be a project in and of itself to make this happen. So you've got 2027 is the first date. That's when you can no longer can order or be reimbursed by the state of New York for an electric bus. And then you've got, is it 2035, I think, is when you can't even have one on the road. So we've got some work to do. There's several districts around us who are engaged in the same type of work. Some with different firms, some with the same firms. So I'm glad to have the ball rolling on that. Kevin had a very nice way of putting it. We don't necessarily need to be the first person scooting out onto the ice, but we need to be ready to move so that we're well within the timeframes that are put out there by the state of New York. Right now, we see nothing that leads us to believe that they're going to adjust their dates. We'll wait and see, so we need to be ready to move. I feel like we're in a good spot. They gave us a time frame. They're talking probably 4 months, 3-4 months to have this study completed for us. But you'll get updates as we get updates, and we'll share them with you. Did I forget anything?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So there's the buildings and grounds component to this, and then there's the actual bus component to this. If we do the infrastructure, the buildings and grounds part, that is aidable, right? Around 80% aidable. Are the buses going to be aidable at all, given the fact that they're so much more expensive than a regular bus?
Two different pieces to it. Bus purchases go through transportation aid, which we get, our rate ratio is 90%, but with the deducts, we're probably 84-85% in that range. So, to answer your question, right now, there's going to be a couple different ways that they're talking about. Nothing straightforward in this, I'm just going to let you know.
Well, what's the fun in that? Yeah, straightforward.
In advance, I'm just going to let you know, nothing straightforward. So, so right now, the buses will be aided based on your transportation aid ratio, but there's also incentives with trading buses in where you'll get bigger trade-ins with certain buses, and then if you purchase certain buses, you'll get basically like a rebate. So there's trade-ins, there's rebates, and there's transportation aid in the buses. When it comes to the capital project piece of actually the structure, the bus garage, putting all the charging units, all that stuff in, there's two different components in that too, because you have your regular capital project building aid, and that's based on what you can get an approved cost. There's no cost allowances on that facility, so it's approved cost. So basically, the state will look at it and say, okay, that's great, you're building a bus garage that fits, versus you don't need a bus garage for 200 buses when you only got 40, that type of thing. So, but then within that, there's also grant money that's coming through to help with infrastructure and buses too. So it's going to be a combination of multiple facets here on how to fund this. And that's why, as people are starting to move forward, we're going to learn a lot more about it.
Can I have one more follow-up question?
Absolutely.
And then I promise I'll stop. The number of electric buses available was not able to meet the need like 3 months ago. Has that changed significantly also between then and now?
They're
It has
planning
not.
on it, but I don't, if it does,
So as part of the kickoff meeting and as part of some other presentations that I've been a part of, and probably other folks have been too, there's stacked mandates. So there's also mandates on the manufacturers, where they have to ramp up their percentage of electric vehicles as well. So that's across trucks, buses, and even our passenger cars. That's why if you go and try to find a car now, if you're looking for a gas model, they're becoming more difficult to find because all those mandates are stacked. So they had a really nice infographic Cornish showed us where they talked about the school bus one that kind of goes on this trajectory, and then the other ones that have been working in the background on this trajectory. So you think they're going to become more available because that's all they're going to be able to sell in New York. But right now they couldn't meet the demand if they had to. You're correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this group works with other local districts. Do they have any information? Because 'cause I think I heard somewhere that there's a few districts locally that have put one or two of these things in, is that right?
There's-
Any
there's-
idea how they're working so far?
There's a couple that are, so locally, there's a couple that are planning. Two districts are working with Cornice and an architectural firm called Tetra Tech. That would be Queensbury and Lake George.
No one has no one has a bus on the road?
They don't have them in yet.
They're not in?
At those two, I'm not aware of others. Bethlehem has a fairly substantial electric fleet
That's on the road?
that's on the
I
road,
have
correct?
no idea how that's going.
It's, they're making it work. They actually had an open house a couple weeks ago, was when we were in Buffalo at the NISBA conference. So they're a good resource. I know that Kevin does know that superintendent from his time up in the Berg, Warrensburg, that is. Oh, was it Stillwater? Oh, she's from Warrensburg. I'll say that part. So he could reach out and get more information, but that's the one of note that's done a lot with electric buses so far. A lot of people went to that open house. Queensbury plans to buy one in next year's budget, and I'm not sure what Lake George's plan is, but I know they're building a whole new bus garage, so they're trying to make sure, they had to do it, they were gonna do it previously before this mandate came in, so they're trying to make sure that it all matches going together now. Other on buildings and grounds?
The last thing I had was the pre-referendum service schoolhouse that we talked about.
Yep, I don't know that we're there yet, but schoolhouse, many of you have seen, Eric came and presented to many of you last year, or 2 years ago now, when we selected them. They put in a pre-referendum proposition for us to look at for our next project. At some point, we do need to have a conversation about bringing somebody on early. As you know, we got through the bidding process last time and found out that our project had been wildly underestimated and the cost had wildly escalated too, due to the supply chain and COVID, which everybody's sick of hearing about, but it's the truth. So the Buildings and Grounds Committee may recommend that we bring them on early to help with the estimating the first time, so we're not going out and bidding twice. I don't know if you want to, either one of you want to speak to that or not, but Eric did a very nice proposal. I don't know if Kevin or Mary Kay, if you want to talk, I know you're in the audience technically, but if you want to speak to our relationship with Schoolhouse and how that process is playing out or has played out in the project we're currently in.
This is my first capital project, so.
Schoolhouse is great to work with, point blank, from the project management piece, but we really deal with, as you recall, we picked up the financial piece with them too. And basically what it allowed us to do, when you have a project this size, things are coming, going, change orders are all over the place, trying to keep track of everything is a nightmare. So we kept our set of books, and Schoolhouse actually kept their set of books too. And we constantly matched with them to make sure, because the one thing you gotta be careful of is you come into a project and we don't have expense that's, we're not sure of an expense, and one comes and you overspend the budget. So it was a great experience because just going through the pay apps, going through everything with them, they made it very clean and very easy. And it was just step by step. And whenever they needed paperwork from contractors, they chased it and got it for us. They handled all this, and it was a minimal amount of money. And I'll speak a little bit to the valuation too, Dan. Because remember something, like when we start to plan a project, we're planning a project 16, 18 months out. It could be over a year before you bid from the time that we vote, depending on what the state approval is. And the fluctuations in costs can really, it makes you take things out of the project because for some reason it never comes in way lower. It's always higher. But these guys are watching the market and what people are bidding on similar projects and similar items. So it's kind of a more up-to-date, real-life pricing than what we may have. So I have nothing but positive things about Schoolhouse to say about Schoolhouse across the project.
So more to come. We have another Buildings and Grounds meeting where we're going to take a very large list, like Mrs. Borling said, and prioritize. And Kevin also had the auspicious task of getting hold of Bernie Donick and Incorporated. Probably spoke with Jason Swartz to talk about our cost allowances so we can right-size the project based on what our state cost allowances are. That means how much of a project will they aid for us? If we think we have $100 million in work to do, but the state will only aid us on $40 million, then guess what size our project needs to be? Right? We all know that. So more to come. It'll be exciting, but we need to be planning that next project right now. And once that one's planned, you likely need to be talking about the next one right then, because Kevin's right. You're 2 months. You're 2 months, 2 years from vote to shovel in the ground or hammer in the wall or whatever the right wording is. That's it on that one, I think.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for Mrs. Barling? Okay, that concludes the buildings and grounds. Brings us to policy. Mrs. Lansman?
Okay, so you will see there's 2 items on the agenda. One of them is just a discussion item. It's the Comprehensive Student Attendance Handbook. And Policy Post recommends about 20 of these policies to be deleted for various reasons. Some of them are like, it's not procedure, it's policy, or it's covered in a different policy, there's no need to repeat it, or it's out of date. Mr. DiCaprio was going through all of them, and it's still in the works, there's still more to be done on that, but we just wanted to put it on here so you knew that that was happening in the background. And then for approval tonight is policy 6121. So we've seen the Policy Pulse recommendation. It basically has been completely updated so that it models or matches the New York State model policy. It will put the district in line with the New York State labor laws. And we did speak with district council on that, and he recommends that we adopt it in full as well. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Okay. So we need a resolution on that?
Yep.
Need a motion to approve that.
Okay, so by recommendation from our district attorney, Mr. Pelchwitz, we just need a motion to approve the 6121 sexual harassment in the workplace policy. Do we have a
So
motion?
moved.
Second? Seconded by?
Second.
Vince, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. That carries. Okay, so that leads us to advocacy. Mrs. Andrew-Phillips.
Okay, so did you want to recap the NISBA conference during your report or right now?
We'll do it during my report.
Okay, and then I'm gonna also hand it over to Dan to talk about the legislative priorities for the BOCES, and we're gonna be making a motion to adopt those here as well.
You got it. I'm going to start with the DFS proposed regulations on pharmacy benefit managers. That was the one that I spoke with you about and put in my updates, where they were going to put an additional fee of no less than $10.18 per pharmacy claim, so per prescription, on each and every prescription that runs through our health insurance consortium, and actually every prescription in the state of New York. Happily, we sent some letters. That was withdrawn by the agency, so that will not be happening. So that's good news for us at this point. We'd like to take credit, but we don't believe it was our letters. We feel that the state probably found out how much that was going to cost them in unanticipated or unbudgeted costs immediately. But again, we did send our letters in, so let's say that it was Jeff's letter that put it over the top.
That's right.
The advocacy priorities, I shared those in last Friday's update. You do have them there for us to approve a resolution to support those, along with the rest of the Wish We schools. So we're asking, we have a few priorities: increasing state support for career and technical education. We talked about this for several years. Right now, you receive aid back on the first $30,000 of a CTE instructor's salary. Average salary for a CTE instructor is around $65,000. So that's a negative for us to send kids to that program. We want to continue to do so. We actually have our highest number of students going to CTE in years this year. This year, I think it cost us an extra, I think it was $300,000 additional cost this year for the number of kids we sent. It's a good program to put kids in. We need people in the trades. So we're asking our legislators to please let us be aided on a number closer to the correct salary. So we're asking to be aided on $60,000. We're hopeful that we'll get some traction on that. That's number one. Two is workforce development. We know we're struggling. Every school district is struggling, and many other aspects of the workforce. Employers are struggling to get people. One of the things that would help us would be to have the retiree waiver. The waiver to continue, which means retirees can work without having to have an approved waiver by the state and make beyond the $30,000 threshold. A lot of places are working and only operating because they have retirees available to them. And we want to attack it from the bottom as well, so we're also asking for them to take a look at Tier 6 and make it more attractive to young people to come into the professions in state and local government jobs. So we'll see what happens there, but we've got to attack that. We've got to keep the old people working and incentivize the young people to come into the field. Is kind of how we're attacking that. Ongoing capital project is our third. As you know, we're doing our $100,000 capital outlay project this year. That's the first one we've done in a while here at Hudson Falls. We are asking them to bring that up to $250,000. $100,000 doesn't buy a lot as far as a building project when you're paying prevailing wage. And you have to have soft costs on top of that, like sometimes construction managers. All the time you have to have an architect in that because you have to submit paperwork to the state of New York with those folks on there. So that would be helpful, and it would also make it so we could do some of those little things so we don't have to have as large projects as often. If you could knock out $250,000 every year over 10 years, you've done a sizable project. 100,000 isn't doing it for us. And for school aid, we're asking that there's a due minimum increase for all districts. As you know, we are fully phased in as of last year. The last 2 years have been really kind to Hudson Falls, although that's making up for a decade of us not having the money we should have had. So what we don't want to have happen now is them say, okay, we're not going to give due increases to people we gave increases to last year, because that's money that was owed to us from a decade ago. So we're advocating for that everybody gets a due minimum, including people who've been made whole, because those folks that were made whole a decade ago got their due minimums for the past 10 years. So we're just trying to make sure that something different doesn't happen now that we've been made whole. And lastly, the zero emission buses, we're asking that the state take a look at the barriers are in the way and the timeline they'd put upon us to make this happen. We just want them to evaluate their existing programs and how they're implementing them for us to get this off the ground. So we'll see where that goes. And then there's two ongoing issues for our area. One doesn't directly affect Hudson Falls. It's a small group health insurance. But as we've talked before, if we lose all the small schools out of our consortium, it means we have less buying power, which means it will get more expensive for the large schools. But we have way over the minimum number of 100 employees here. We have several school districts as neighbors who are right there on the line. But if we lose those 8 or 9 small schools out of our BOCES of 31, the costs for us are going to go up. There's no way that they won't. And I realize that we're in the Kashik, which is actually the capital area schools who we're in our consortium with, but they also have small schools. It will be the same effect. It's going to cost us more if the small schools are forced out of our consortiums. And the last ongoing issue is the school year calendar. Just trying to make people aware that we are certainly in support of any holiday getting its due recognition, but it is making it more difficult to schedule the 180 school days between September 1 and June 30th, especially with specific contractual obligations that school districts have, which are different across every school district. So we just want to put that on their radar that we do want to be supportive, but we might need some flexibility later to say we can claim a day before September 1st or after June 30th for state aid purposes, because we need to be able to fit all those days in for our kids. As you know, Asian Lunar New Year is the newest school holiday. It's January 29th next year. For all of those with children, there will not be school on January 29th. Did I say June? January 29th. Yep. So just letting you know. Last year there was a conversation about Diwali being a holiday, and again, we don't know where the legislature will take that, and absolutely nothing against Diwali. We just want to make sure there's a way for us to get those school days in, and that they have a plan for that as they approve more holidays as school holidays. Those are the priorities. And I am recommending you guys pass a resolution tonight to support those. We would send that on to our legislators and to the governor's office as well.
Oh, and one more thing before we move on. Dan had mentioned it in one of his Friday emails, but I attended the voting delegate
Oh, yeah.
ASBA. It's not really a conference, it's just a
Meeting.
procedure. Yeah.
Meeting.
And it was very, very long. We reviewed 56 proposals, and Dan sent the results of that to everybody. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. But very similar to the priorities that Dan just listed. And that's all I have for you, Fred.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Hudson Falls Central School District approves the 2024 legislative and budget priorities. Do we have a motion? Motion by Mike, seconded by
Second.
Heidi. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, that brings us to our superintendent's report.
Yeah, so bad for you, my voice is doing all right tonight. I'm doing okay. So first on there is the NYSBA conference, and we're going to speak to that, and we've got some slides and things. But NYSBA sent me some certificates for people, so I do want to recognize Mrs. Amanda Landsman for her attendance at the Annual Convention and Education Expo in Buffalo, October 26th to the 28th, 2023, direct from Barry J. Entwistle. You got it, the director of NYSBA, so congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Put it on the fridge.
Yep.
And then also want to recognize Mrs. Heidi Anderkovics for attending the NYSBA Annual Convention and Education Expo in Buffalo back in October.
Thanks.
All right. So, in my report, there's a link to the entire conference, every session that we went to. But what we did is we had, I had Kelly put on the sessions I went to, the sessions that Heidi went to, and the sessions Amanda went to. So if you have questions that you want to ask about those topics, you certainly can. So I think we'll go. Do we have it?
I'm ready for it.
Go for it. Who's first? Is it me or is it? So I was going to say I'll let the ladies go first. But so as you can see, I went to one on the buses. A lot of great information. There was other school districts from our area there. Actually, Queensbury, Lake George, and Queensbury, Lake George, and another district I can't remember right now. We're all in the same room with me, along with about 30 other school districts, trying to get more information on this. And it was talking about some of the grants that Kevin had alluded to as well. There's a few different tiers, so more to come as we get through the process. The second one I went to was about changing the classroom experience. It actually ended up being about construction projects. When I looked at it, this space that we're sitting in right now was exactly what they were talking about, doing things like this for kids. So it was reaffirming and exciting to see that be what they're talking about. We all went to the keynote, our shared humanity, which was an awesome speaker. I thought it was very impactful. A huge room full of people listening to that person present, and she held our attention for probably about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Safety solutions in special education. As many of you know, we had a specific concern in one special education room last year with an employee, and this was right up my alley, and maybe dealing with something like that later on. So I'll share some information with Mrs. Miles when I'm able to do so on some of those things. But she also has been working through trying to find different equipment and things for specific classrooms where we're dealing with students with multiple disabilities to make sure that we don't have employees being injured just by trying to do their job and do good things for kids. Hardening the target, softening the environment, that was about school safety. A lot of talk about, you can see it there, working on the outside of buildings and making them harder to penetrate, but it also was talking about making the inside of the buildings more welcoming and a place where students and adults will report things so we can take action on it before there is issues. suspension disproportionality, about biases. I went in, we do get on occasion identified as a school district with suspension disproportionality. So I went in and heard a nice talk from a gentleman from Rutgers. The audience was very diverse. There was a lot of good takeaways from that as well, so I'm happy to talk about it more. And then the last morning that we were there, Heidi and I were both in, let's not freak out about AI. And boy, some of that stuff can make you freak out pretty quickly. So if you haven't had a chance to hear about AI from an education standpoint, that can be very entertaining and very scary. And I know that some of our administrators have been out to some AI stuff with Bill Daggett, which is kind of, that was at ASBA's last meeting that we were at too. He was there. So we're all being exposed to that, and there's some real opportunity there, but there's also some real concern there for people as well. So that's my laundry list of things. If you want to hear more, I'm happy to talk at a different time. Heidi's up next.
Okay, so just a plug for anybody who wants to try and attend NISBA next year. It really is designed so that there are about 4 sessions a day, and every session there are like 5 to 20 different sessions happening on different topics. So you can, as a group, we all sat down and we're like, we're all interested in A, B, and C, so you go there, and I'll go there, because they were relevant to the district. It was really value added. So just if you're interested next year, I'm just saying.
It's in New York City next year.
Yeah. So I went to, the first one I went to was, I thought it was going to be like children getting into advocacy, and I should have read it a little more in detail. It was kind of a sales pitch for an app that helps kids keep track of their requirements for the Seal of Civic Readiness. And it seemed like a great app. It was presented by a superintendent of a school district who uses the app, and then also the company hoping to sell the app. It was thoughtful, but we're already doing the Seal of Civic Readiness, so I could have gone to something more relevant, probably. Farm to School meets health and wellness. Amanda and I attended this together. I had to scoot out to go to the BOCES Consortium, but that, I love the idea of, and Amanda can speak more to that in total. The BOCES Education Consortium, as I feel my way through my first year on the BOCES board, was a lot of just how BOCES is so different than a local school district and how it encompasses so much. So that was a lot for me to process, probably not relevant to our district, aside from the fact that we're members of BOCES. The keynote speaker was Desmond Tutu's daughter, y'all. She was inspiring. What a great keynote. The Family Support Center's session that I went to was actually my favorite one. We had talked a little when we were talking about our buildings and ground and our plan for our capital project, taking the kindergarten center and like turning it into more of like a community-based access to programs and therapies available in the community, and that's what this district did. The district that presented it, though, was a very affluent district, and they, I would say where we get BOCES aid up to like in the 80%, probably get no BOCES aid or state aid at all, and their community agreed and voted to fund an entire new building out of tax money. So they're in a different kind of situation than we are, but it was really like this amazing wraparound, just mental health, not for kids, but for everyone in the community, because you can't have a good learning environment if you don't have a good home environment, good teaching environment, good community environment was the idea. So that one I thought was amazing, and I would love to try and figure out how we can put some of those ideals into work in our district. We just don't have the financial resources that that particular district did. School board ethics and conflicts of interest. Do I really need to go on about that? It's stuff we've heard at every NISBA retreat that we've ever been to. And then the teacher workforce crisis, solving it through registered apprenticeship programs was super interesting. We've participated in that through BOCES. It was a great sales pitch, by the people doing it, essentially you are participating and paying to participate. It's almost like doctors go through a residency, so these would be teachers going through a residency with mentors. And the idea was that it increases retention. I don't believe our district has had that experience with that program, but it was food for thought. And then the AI conference I went to with Dan, and it was terrific, but it'll blow your mind what AI can do. For example, the presenter had taped himself saying 2 minutes of like boring stuff, and then like imparted an AI program on it, and he could say the same thing in Japanese and German, and did so, and it would move his lips the way that it would if he was speaking Japanese or German, and it sounded like he was fluently speaking those languages, which was nuts to me. And then when you think about how you can extrapolate that into the field of education, it's nuts. But it's a lot to think about. So I had a great experience if anybody wants to learn about it. We sent the slides through, but if you want to talk about any of that further, hit me up.
I have to read mine off of this thing because I did not bring my glasses. It's actually kind of fuzzy, which is upsetting. So, the active shooter drill was by a guy who was selling a film for glass, but it was nice because also being part of the safety committee, a lot of the things that he was saying to do aside from buy the film for the glass is stuff that we're already talking about doing, we train people to do. So that was really great. The Farm to School Meets Health and Wellness, the guy who presented on that was a joint superintendent of 2 different school districts with a combined student population of like 600 kids. So what they are doing is amazing, and I love it, and I love the idea, but I don't think it would work on the scale that they do it in our district. But that doesn't mean we couldn't take certain parts of it and try to do it here. It was really, really interesting, and I loved every bit about it. Keynote speaker, innovative strategies to motivate and build resilience in every student. Again, that was somebody trying to sell a method that staff would use, everybody would be trained on. It was called the Why Try method. And it actually seemed very cool as well. It was a bunch of steps that kids would follow. And I mean, it was a really, really great class. And then the Remembrance Project was honoring history, specifically World War II, through sport, community, and curriculum. And that one at first, when it started, I was like, why am I here? I'm in the wrong room. I don't know why I picked this one, but it was so cool what they did. It all started with a football game that was supposed to be, I'm going to get this all wrong, but I guess the Battle of the Bulge, they were going to have a football game because the war was over, and then the Battle of the Bulge happened, so they didn't get to do this football game, so this was like a memorial football game. They made it their homecoming game between this one school and their rival school. They're just, I mean, Google it, look it up. It was crazy. And what they did was a K through 12 curriculum that whole week leading up to it, where the kids just learned all about everything having to do with World War II, age appropriate, of course, but it was really, really interesting to hear. The Advocates and Ambassadors was basically about engagement through social media. That was interesting because a lot of people in that room, have you seen that commercial with the old ladies and they have the pictures on the wall and they're like, I unfriend you, and they take it off the wall? It's kind of how these people were in that room. That's not how any of this works. So I was glad I went, but again, we do a great job with that, and it was very frustrating to sit through people not knowing how to do anything on Facebook. And then, oh my gosh, this last one. What's the value of one saved life? So I thought I was going into something completely different, like sports related. This was about suicide prevention. They showed a video in the beginning of this session that had everyone in the room in tears. And then once the tears started, for me anyway, they didn't stop through the entire time that I was sitting in this. It just was an amazing class, and I know I keep saying amazing, but I'm so glad that there were so many options and that we were able to sit down and say, you go here, I want to do this. And we all got different things. There was only a couple overlaps of things. And that was a heavy session to end on. Heavy session. I'm glad I went, but it's not what I was expecting. Heavy.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Just because I really think you guys would all really benefit from going if you ever have a chance. So in between the sessions, you have like a half an hour where you can mill around in the expo area. And a lot of it is sales pitch, you know, like they're trying to sell turf or stuff like that. But there's also really great things that you can, we got to check out some electric buses. I didn't know what I was looking at, Dan did. They had an FFA booth there with, there were mini horses one day, there were sheep, there were guinea pigs, there were rabbits. But the best part was the students were there from the FFA and they were able to talk about how their ag program was helping them pick a career path and the opportunities that were open to them. And that was really cool. We got to see, it's medical.
Oh, that was awesome.
Right, so they have like this smart board, but it's 3D. And they took their bodies and froze them and then like sliced them up millimeter at a time and then videotaped it. And so you can dissect someone without dissecting them. And they had dogs. And so like for science class, or if you have like an ECHA program that's pre-med, they were exorbitantly expensive. But they had therapy dogs on like display there, walking throughout. There were all kinds of ways to like, you could taste test vegetarian burgers and see if you were interested in, you know, offering that to your students. It was just, there's so much you can bring back to your district.
Yeah, a lot of
That's
ideas.
all, I'm done.
And if you want to see, I did look, we didn't appear in any of the photos.
Oh,
Although I can see Mike Patton in here from Saratoga Springs. For sure I can pick him out. He's way far away, but if you want to see, you can see it's huge. I signed up to win that tractor. I'm hoping that I find out in 6 months I did, but no doubt, it's a nice event. There's a lot of learning that happens. There's a lot of networking that happens. Unfortunately, this time they had to spend 6 hours in the car with me to go 3 hours out and 3 hours back. But actually, we spent a lot of time talking about school stuff as well. So it's an experience. Moving on, I already gave the pharmacy update. Science research news, I just wanted to let the board know, we always hear from our science research folks, and many board members go down, or we have it here usually, but last year we had to go down to the Strand, so people go to those presentations. But we had two of our seniors, Lucy Ray and Marissa Colvin. They were able to submit their applications to the Regeneron Science Talent Search, so it's a huge accomplishment. They have to do, I think it's a 20 plus page research paper that they have to submit that's developed over the last 3 years of research. So I just wanted to say those two young people's names out loud to the board and thank Mr. Vartuli for sending me this information, and obviously Mr. Livingston as well, and everybody from the high school that makes that possible for those students. So again, two of the seniors, Lucy Ray and Marissa Colvin, just wanted to give them props here this evening. We'll probably be hearing more from them as the school year goes on. Also, wanted to share, and I know this comes, I don't get this from every school. I remember getting these in previous districts, but Oneonta sent a letter, as they do every year, and talked about, gave a list of people who graduated from Oneonta. So I thought it'd be worthwhile to say that they say these are Hudson Falls High School previous graduates. Connor C. Page with a bachelor's in anthropology, cum laude, back in August, and then Megan M. Gibo, BS in biology, and Trevor J. Hill, a BS in criminal justice. So we had three alumni graduate from SUNY Oneonta. And if any other school sends me it, I'll be happy to announce the other folks' names too, but I figured I would share that. That's good news. You have my goals. You had them in the packet. They're on there to be approved this evening. I can answer any questions about them if I need to. I put them out on a couple of Friday notes for people to give feedback. I hadn't received any, and Jeff and Amanda hadn't provided me any feedback that they had received, so I put them out as the final draft for you folks to approve this evening by resolution. That's what I have, other than we do have our first accountability / data presentation that we've had in a while, and that's why the principals are here. And I'm sorry that we're a little bit longer tonight. There's a lot of good things to share before we got to these folks, but they're really the main show tonight to talk about some of the student data. So Mike's going to lead. They're here to help answer questions. It's not a 2-hour presentation. We asked for it to be like a 15-minute presentation, but we spent 1 year, a couple of years with COVID. We got ourselves back on our feet, and now we're ready to start taking steps forward. That's how I'll kind of equate it. So the first part of taking a step forward is showing you where we're at. So that's what this is about.
Can we do the resolution?
You want to do the resolution first?
do that
Yeah,
first.
we'll do the resolution first. Okay.
Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Hudson Falls Central School District approves the 2023-2024 superintendent goals. Do we have a motion?
So,
So moved by Mike, seconded by? Amanda, all in favor? Opposed? That carries.
Great. So one of those
You better
goals
follow
talks about providing the board with more data. So we're going to get this baby started off with a bang. So we've got a data
5%.
presentation scheduled for
That's
tonight.
5% of that right now.
Scheduled for tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and I'm actually going to get out of the way of the board. So I'm going to go around the
Is
side.
my head too big to?
Mike and the principals.
So you do have the 4 building principals here. If you have any
I'm okay.
detailed questions, we do have them here as a resource. They prefer I speak, so I'm happy to run through this for you. But if you have any specific things, that's why they're here. I always start with context, right? This is who we are on any given year. Our special ed classified rate runs somewhere between 22 and 24%, depending on the day. And same thing with our economically disadvantaged students, anywhere from 50 to 55%. Oh, I'm on the wrong computer. Kind of a wonky graph, but I wanted to show you the up and then the down. What you're looking at is 5 November's points of data from November of 2019, 2020, November 21, November 22, November 23, our chronic absenteeism rate. So high water mark, lots and lots of absenteeism in 21. And then it's come back down almost to where it was pre-COVID. Just over 20%, 22-ish% right now. So I just want to acknowledge the progress. You've heard so much about our work on absenteeism and attendance and chronic absenteeism across my 5 years, certainly Dan's 3 years. It's coming down. It's coming down. None of these slides are going to say, yup, we are where we want to be, but I do want to acknowledge that's really good progress there. Again. Yep, thank you. These are June's Regents passing percentages. The top line story is in the column on the far right. So our passing rates in June are that column on the far right. Where we need work, this is a real point of interest, something you should know about. For the past couple of years, there have been these basically COVID appeals, basically low pass COVID appeals. Because of COVID, the students who've taken tests over the past few years were able to pass with a 50 rather than a 65. So if you look at that second column, the appeals pass column, that shows you all the students last year who scored over 50 but lower than 65. Those count as pass last year. They will not count as pass in June or January or August or ever again. All right, so that's conversations that I've been having with department chairs. Myself and Mrs. Hogan have been having with department chairs. Those are the kids who are on the cusp, right? Those are the kids, if we can move them up just 5 or 10 points, we're going to get them over the finish line. And because of the way the state worked the last couple of years, we did. Going down to the elementary level, really consistent, surprisingly really consistent this past year in terms of performance. About a third of our kids getting 3s and 4s and over 40% across the board in math. Typically we have one grade or another is always high and one grade or another is always down in the 20s. I can tell you I've been doing this for 25 years. There's never rhyme or reason to when you get that high point or that low point. To see it this consistent is again a unique story. To be a better district, I'd like to see these in the mid-40s. You'd really like to see the ELA get above 40. You'd like to see math get above 45. Those would be good goals to shoot for. That would put you in line with most of the other districts around us. High demographic, low demographic. If you got up into the 40s, you'd be right on track with everybody else. If anybody's interested, typically I break this out. I don't have the data to break it out, but typically I break this out so you can see where the special ed performance is for those and where the economically disadvantaged are as well. Those numbers are always lower, but if you're interested, you know, Dan will guide me to give you more information. Shifting from the hard data, we're doing this thing called the PASS survey in all 5 of our schools. We played with it last year. We surveyed our students twice last year, and we're digging in a little more this year. So the PASS survey, what I want you to look at are the white boxes, what it's surveying, and just how much green is on there. I don't need to dig in really deep. It's geeky. I can look at this type of stuff for every single student. What you're looking at is a survey that gives students twice a year, and it's their own feelings about school. It's not asking them the home they come from. It's not asking them about what their grades are or which parent has this challenge. It's asking them their own feelings, what they think is their own capacity for different things in school. How do they feel about their ability to learn? How do they feel about their own work ethic? How do they feel about their confidence to be able to learn these things? And it's nationally normed, which means it's compared to thousands of other kids. And green is good. Green is better than anything that shows up in yellow. Yellow is better than anything that shows up in orange. Orange is better than anything that shows up in red. What I really want to draw your attention to is every single, if you look at the whole building as a whole, the high school, the middle school, the intermediate, the primary 3rd grade, the primary grades 1, 2, it's a different survey, same as the survey that we give kindergartners. It's green across the board. I can look at this, we can look at this for all 2,100 students, and it's not roses for everybody, right? There's plenty of students who show up in red, who don't feel good about school, who don't feel good about their work ethic, who don't feel like they can live up to the demands of school. But as a whole, when you're looking at the building as a whole, we're green across the board. What that tells me is when we want to tackle hard things like this, or hard things like this, the kids are coming to us in a good spot. And the kids are coming to us. They're not making excuses for themselves. They're coming to us saying, yep, I can do this. Yep, we have the capacity for it. So we're digging into this a little bit more this year. I had my first meeting with Mrs. Whitman at the K Center and the psychologist who implements it. We're talking about what do you like about it, what don't you like about it, how are you using it? And basically what she did was she flipped the results upside down. She looked at all the red kids, the kids who were showing up as not feeling positive, and she's building groups around that. So she's seeing groups of those kids built around where they show up in red. So immediate implementation to see if we can get those kids back on track to feel better about school, and we keep on rolling. So something a little bit different for you this year. Dan's theme this year was ready, set, go, basically, right? And like his preamble there was, COVID's over, we're building our momentum now, let's go. These are some of the first things we're doing. Some of the work is in place a little bit longer, but really this is, look, we're all back, no excuses, time to go. So Mrs. Hogan and I have been meeting with department chairs to say, hey, look, when you look into this data, when you look into how they're performing on these state tests, on the regents, we can see a very specific weakness of theirs. So we've tasked them with doing that, addressing that on a more regular basis. You've heard plenty about the initiatives going on in the middle school. Literacy is everything. You know, even on a math test, kids have to have the endurance to be able to read pages of information before they answer one single multiple choice question. There's new science tests coming out, and on the samples, the multiple choice answers, each answer is like 2 lines of text long. So you have to keep all of this stuff in your head just to answer a single multiple choice question. It's literacy across the board. So you'll see down in our elementary schools, we're getting back to how to read. All the way up through middle school, we're talking about reading for all. You've heard Will talk about project-based learning. He's connecting with me over here. He's listening to the Remembrance Project and saying that's project-based learning through and through. We've done work on bringing down those engaging courses, inventing new high school level electives for our 8th graders. We're getting started. I don't think Mr. Ward would let us make excuses. The results are not where we want them to be, but we've got work going on. And I know I'm the last person stopping you.
Mike, I have a question. If you went
Yeah,
back
please.
about 3 slides, keep going, keep going. Yeah, what would be a reason for the decline in the numbers from middle school to high school in the categories?
Those are all, so I think it's 50 multiple choice questions the students answer. So each of those categories has, say, approximately 10 questions.
Okay.
Depending on how the students answered, let's say there's 10 questions on feelings about school, each student only answered 3 of those positively,
Oh, okay.
right? Versus the middle school where 6 of the 10 kids answered them positively.
Right,
Answered
so,
6 of the 10
yeah, so I was just kind of like wondering, like, what would cause them to feel differently between, like, say, for example, like feelings about school 62 and go down to 34 at the high school
I don't
level?
have that answer for you.
Okay.
That's the work, right?
That's the work.
Trying
Right.
to figure out why.
Yep.
Okay.
Which students are they? Is it one of our subgroups? Is it our special ed kids? Is it our,
Okay.
that's the work.
Okay.
The interesting thing is, even though those numbers are so much lower, it's still green, which is odd, but that tells you that that's right in line with the rest of high schools across the country.
Okay. Interesting.
It's a big drop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you can see it, I think, well, maybe not
It's
down
pretty
here
level
so much.
there.
Pretty level. And then
You
you
see
see
it
the drop
start
off as
declines.
it hits up there. Yep.
Interesting.
It's really pretty interesting to dig into.
Yeah.
We can look at every single student, each of those, we can flip-flop it 1,000 different ways. It's pretty cool.
Cool.
Questions for me or questions for the principals? All right,
So,
now go Dan.
all right, awesome. So I won't be much longer, but I do want to just thank the principals for the work that's happening and the work that's going to happen. We sat in this exact room this morning for 2 hours working through strategic planning with Nicole Eliotto from Aldo Brave Consulting Services. So they're working on some building objectives or some drafts of ideas for building objectives. So we've got a lot of work to do. But in the end, when we take a look at those numbers, we had a really good conversation maybe 3 weeks ago about those numbers and what they say and don't say about Hudson Falls and what we want for our kids. So it's been interesting just to have those conversations in a safe place. We have conversations in a safe place. So appreciate the work. I appreciate you being here tonight. I realize it's a late night and you guys are back here early.
How's
But
Stella doing?
Stella's okay over there. But really, we wanted to be here because if you had a question, rather than say we'll follow back up, here we are. It's the same team. We're sitting in the room. Mike and I meet with the principals almost every Monday. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for all of you, but they're good conversations that we're having every single week about different topics, and some of them are about data like this. No need for executive session, but I have one other thing.
Okay.
So we had some meeting changes just to help everybody with calendars, because I know it's holiday time, which gets busy. And I believe we've updated them all electronically, but for folks who just get on that schedule, that every third Wednesday is gonna be something. I wanna get those out there. So November 22nd, next Wednesday, is a school holiday. So athletic has been canceled and not rescheduled. We'll just go on to the next month. BG, Buildings and Grounds was moved to 11/28, November 28th at 9 a.m. right in this room. And that'll be a follow-up from the one we had last time about the long list of items. And if I go ahead into January 29th, Buildings and Grounds and Athletics needs to move because Ryan and I are both in Albany at an athletic council meeting. So we can either go to the 23rd or 25th, I think is what you and I had on our list.
It's the 24th. You're trying
Oh, sorry, it was the 24th. My handwriting is bad. It was January 24th was supposed to be the meeting. We can go to the 23rd or the 25th.
No, it's just,
Oh.
my finger was down like that.
Anybody have any for athletics? Do you have, or do you want me to have Kelly send it out and you can get back to us?
I would say we're good for the 23rd.
23rd for athletics? No, it was supposed to be initially the 24th. We're going on one side or the other. So 23rd for athletics. And then BG, do them both same day?
Meg, can you do B and G the 23rd? Looking at the 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we moved Buildings and Grounds and Athletics to January 23rd. And those are the changes I had, because I know people get,
Still have buildings and grounds on the 22nd.
we deleted it today.
Why is it spelled like that?
I'll check it again, but we definitely went through it, and I attempted to delete it today, but,
The next week.
yeah, so there is not a meeting on the 22nd. If you come, you'll be all by yourself.
Not really.
Take good minutes. The 23rd. That's what I had.
Okay. Yep. So at this point, that concludes regular session. I just need a motion to adjourn. So moved by Amanda, seconded by Mike. All in favor? Opposed? Yeah.